this morning, we want to wrap up our whole focus of the last month. We've been focusing on 4 qualities of this most full time of the year. And it does get a little full, a little crazy sometimes, doesn't it? But it is full of all sorts of beautiful things, too. And so the very first week, we focused on the unexpected quality, I think, of wonder. And we talked about the astonishment and about the marvel. And we'll talk about it a little bit more this morning. But then the next week, we talked about this quality that we're all desperate for. And we are desperate for peace. In lives, in a city, in a nation, in a world that's so full of non-peace. It seems to me we are desperate for it. And so that's what Jesus brings. Third, last week we talked about something that's not directly mentioned in the story, but it's embedded in the story, is this issue of hope that we bring to the table. And so we talked about that. But this week we want to talk about kind of the pinnacle quality, maybe the highest one. And it's not just because it's the shortest word, so it fit at the top of the tree. We wanted to say, that maybe there's the most joyful time of the year. Now, I don't know about you, but you probably would say, yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I wish I could tell you all the things that have gone wrong this week in preparing for today. I wish I could tell you all the things that went wrong this morning, just among the people that I've interacted with. I wish I could tell you the despair and the hurt and the disappointment and the pain that people go through. And guess what? I don't really need to tell you, do I? Because you have the same one. You have the same stuff. And so you kind of say, okay, I'd like it to be joyful. But the pain of this world and the disappointments, the things that go wrong, you think, well, maybe it's just a nice little story we tell at Christmas time. A nice little thing that we say, let's be joyful. And so somehow we try to pump it up. We try to see if we can get that smile on and, hey, Merry Christmas. How you doing today? Maybe it's a little hard. But I wonder if maybe there's something bigger. And I think this story has to tell. So here's what I'd like to do. Just like every other week this month, we've been reading this story, 20 verses out of Luke. I'd like to read it again this morning to put it in context, and I'd like to look at one verse especially. But look at this. Let me just read it for us. Luke 2, verses 1 through 7 is about the birth of Jesus, and then 8 through 20, we're going to look at the shepherds and the angels. Here it is. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus to all the world that all the world should be registered against Jewish law, only for the Romans, right? Because they were so arrogant, they wanted to know how many people they controlled. The Jews never needed to know how many people were involved because they believed that God was big enough no matter what. But the Romans needed it. And so it was during the registration of Quirinius, which was governor of Syria, and to all went to be registered, each to his own town. And so Joseph went up from Galilee from the town of Nazareth, where they were living, to Judea, to the city of David, which was called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the lineage of David. This was his ancestral hometown. That's where you needed to go. And so he went there, and he registered with Mary, his betrothed, his engaged to marry him, who was pregnant. A little tough. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there wasn't any room for them in the inn. See, this is their hometown. Lots of extended family lived there. But it wouldn't be cool to take a pregnant single woman into their home. There was no place for that to be. Even the little hotel there was full up because all we've got is a cave. All we've got is a stable for you. In the embarrassment and in the shame, they were totally put out. All they got was a cave. Wow, it's incredible, isn't it? Look at verse 8. And in the same region, all of a sudden, things began to change. In the same region, there was the shepherds out in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. Guys just doing their job, right? Guys who were doing kind of the low-life job, in a sense. They never got to go to the temple because they worked with these animals all day long. So they never got to go to the temple. They never got to worship with the rest of Israel. And so incredible, they're out there watching their flock by night. We don't know exactly what time of the year it was. Frankly, I think if you look at historical things, probably December 25th is probably when it happened. Historically. It really did happen then. And it's a cold time in the Middle East at this time. And they're out they're out at night watching their flocks, and an angel of the Lord appeared to them. And a glory of the Lord shone around them. All right, you guys, let's just admit it. This is either a nice little story or this is wild. This is supernatural. This is a bit crazy. This is incredible. God shows up and does something unique. And there's all this glory that's shining around them. And so the natural thing that they do, which you and I would do the same, is it says, and they were filled with great fear. It freaked them out a little bit. They're like, whoa, what's happening here? You and I do the same thing. And the angel said to them, fear not. For behold, I bring you good news of great joy. Circle it. We'll come back to it. Great joy. It's what we're talking about this morning. That will be for all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, Messiah, who is Christ the Lord. The Messiah. The promised Messiah of Israel has now come. He'd been promised for ages. They've been looking for him for years. And they think, wouldn't now be a great time for him to come as the Romans are decimating our culture, decimating our people? Wouldn't it be great if you came now, Messiah? And it says he came, and who's he tell? He tells these shepherds. That's incredible. Look at verse 12. And this will be a sign for you, and you shall find a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts. This is like an army of angels, right? This is like a lot of them, freaking them out a little bit more. This is like thousands of thousands upon 10,000s. Whoa! And here's what they're saying. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, shalom. May the fullness of God be with you. May the fullness of all that he is, and his honesty and his integrity, but also his grace and his mercy. May the depths of who God is be with you. Peace, shalom be with you. Wow. Among those with whom he is pleased. And when the angels went away from them into heaven, the shepherds naturally said, whoa, we better do something about this. And they said to one another, let's go over to Bethlehem and see the thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us. Look at 16. And when they went with haste, they got after it. If this happened to you, would you not put it in fourth gear and step on it? That's exactly what they did. And they went and found Mary and Joseph and this baby lying in a manger. And when they saw it, they made known the saying that had been told them concerning this child. The very first evangelists. All they did was go and tell the truth. They went and told people, you won't believe this, but you should have seen what happened out in the field tonight. This angel appeared. And then it got really, 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 really bright. And then there were thousands of angels all around us saying, glory to God. And so they went and told people simply what had been told them. They simply told them what had happened. They were the first evangelists, right? And it says this in verse 18, and all who heard it, circle it, wondered, marveled, were astonished, were blown away. They were amazed at what is being told to them, of what the shepherds told them. And Mary treasured these things up, pondering them in her heart. And the shepherds returned. They went back to work, glorifying and praising God for all that they had seen and heard, as it had been told them. Wow. Now, you guys, this morning, what I want to do is just briefly look at this verse 10. I want to circle great joy. He says there's great joy. And I want to put it in juxtaposition, in relationship to the verse before. Look at this, great fear, right? Here comes this message, and they are totally scared to death. And the angel says, hey, don't freak out, man. Don't fear. So let's just let's kind of isolate this verse by itself. Let's put a black background on it. These guys in the back, they can do this so fast. It's stunning. But here's the deal. The angel says to them, let's underline it, fear not. Don't be afraid. I know that kind of was wild, but don't be afraid. You guys, let me just ask you, there is so much in our world to be afraid of. What are you afraid of today? There are probably all sorts of things. World peace, political chaos. The murder rate in our city is unbelievable. The tragedy in our own lives are almost unspeakable. And it's so easy to fear, and he says, fear not. And then look at this second kind of phrase, for behold. You have to grab a hold of something. What are you grabbing a hold of in life? What are you doing with life? What are you going to hold on to that's secure and solid and real and worth it? Or what's pushing you around like a wave in the sea? He says, for behold, and look at this, I bring you good news. It's almost an understatement, right? You know, he's like, man, I bring you really good news. Here's what this angel is saying. This good news this is called the gospel of Christ. He's going to bring in good news to you. And then look at this next one, and we'll circle it. No, we'll underline it. For great joy. We'll come back to that, okay? And now, look at this next part. That will be for all the people. For everyone. This great joy, this good news is for every person. For all the people. Who's that mean? Well, we'll talk about it in a minute. But let's go back to great joy. Let's circle it here. Great joy. You guys, this word, I don't know about you, but joy is a cool word, right? I mean, it's a cool word. It's nice. It's fun. Yeah, we have great joy. This word's so much bigger than that. It's in blue up there. Let's put something red around it. Let's make it a little bigger, okay? This is a big word. And it's probably even bigger than that. Let's put something green around it for Christmas, okay? This is like big, okay? This is a big word. Now, it's even bigger than that. So let's put something kind of neutral behind it. Let's put on something gray. This is a giant word, okay? This idea of great joy. Now, I just want to define it here for a second. This word great, just for a moment, I want to look at it. It's a Greek word. It's called megalon. It comes from the Greek word megos, which is the word from which we get mega, right? And what it means is large, great, in the widest sense. This is like incredible joy. This is mega joy, right? You watch, on TV and you get the mega mouth shark. You ever seen that? It's got this giant mouth. I mean, it's a mega. This is a mega joy. It's not just some nice little joy that we put a little candle to. This is giant. This is huge. This word expands beyond what you can even imagine. Okay, so we got that. This is a great something. This is a great joy. Let's go to joy. In modern culture, it seems to me, when we think about joy, in fact, this is what our modern day dictionaries define joy as. It's a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. And you know what? We like that. We want that, okay? But I don't know about you, but if that's what it is, joy seems to escape pretty quickly of this great pleasure and happiness. People hurt you and violate you. People drive stupid and they run into you. People treat you with contempt. People tell you you have no value. A world tells you you're just one among billions. It doesn't really matter. Great pleasure and happiness is so fleeting because it's dependent on circumstances, right? Of course it is. And here's the beauty of this. This word joy, biblically, is so much different. Is so much better. Is so much bigger. And let me just give you a feel for it here. In the Greek, the word for joy is charon. It comes from charis, which is interesting. It means joy, gladness, but it also is a cognate, or in other words, a cousin, a related word, closely related, like brother and sister, almost from the same DNA, if you will, from the word grace. That's interesting, isn't it? And what it really actually means is this, is it means to delight in God's grace. To delight in it. And to have great delight in God's grace. It's not just happiness. It's not just kind of joyfulness. It is this incredibly delighting, deep-set thing of God's grace that shows up. It also means this, to experience God's grace. To experience it. God's grace isn't dependent on circumstances. God's grace isn't dependent on whether things are going well or not. Like we walked in this morning and we say, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's great. Merry Christmas. And deep down in your soul, you're saying, and I have this incredible place of pain, of disappointment, of hurt. And I wish it'd go away. And it's into that place, into the dark and the cold of our lives that God's grace comes. It means this. To be so engaged by God's grace that he gives joyfulness. To be so engaged, for behold, right? Behold. So engaged in God's grace that it gives joyfulness. So what is God's grace? We got to answer the question. If it's so dependent on God's grace, what is it? Well, let's look at this for a second. Let's put a nice yellow thing here. Grace. Here's what it means. I'll give you a couple. God's benevolence towards the undeserving. God's kindness towards the undeserving. That's his grace. So you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. Kevin, you don't deserve it. God shows up and he says, Kevin, you don't deserve it. But I want to give it to you. It is my benevolence, my kindness towards the undeserving, God says. In fact, it's this. Let's go to another one. God's rich kindness offered to us based on his character, not ours. See, his kindness towards you isn't built on you and how good or how bad you've been. Whether you ended up this year on the naughty list or on the nice list. And I think I ended up on the first more often this year than I did on the nice. It's not dependent on that. It's dependent on the fact that in his character, he desires to give grace. And he desires to give it to you. No matter what. That's what he's like. That's what God is like. His grace is his rich kindness offered to us based on his character, not on ours. Wow. So if that's what it is, joy is this, I think. Well, let me give it one last definition. Joy is the enormous delight of being defined by the unearned kindness of God in a way that obliterates fear and replaces it with a deep sense of satisfaction in our soul. Joy is this enormous delight that we can experience. Because you need to push aside all the disappointments and pains and failures of your life. Because God's grace covers that. God's grace slips in and begins to make everything that's wrong right, to make everything that's broken healed. And his grace decides to do it, desires to do it. And he's not depending on you to be good to do it. He wants it in your life, his grace. It is this enormous delight of being defined by the unearned kindness of God in a way that obliterates fear and replaces it with a deep sense of satisfaction in the human soul. Wow. You guys, it is this. It is grace recognized. Not just recognized from afar, but recognized in your own life. And it brings joy. You've been set free. It is for freedom that Christ came, to set you free. And that you don't have to feel guilty about being joyful because you've just been forgiven. You've just been set free. You've just been embraced by the God who made you. The world tells you there's probably not a God at all, but if it is, there is a God. He's very weak and he doesn't matter. And so go do your own thing. And if it's a dead-end road and at the end of it you end up there a wreck, then let's just see if we can excuse you and squash you and throw you away. And God says, when you reach that dead end, what I want to do is I want to give you my grace. I want to forgive you. I want to embrace you. And I want to head you in a new direction. Wow. Grace recognized. And here's the deal, you guys. Here's the amazing thing. It started in a stable. Is that like crazy? Come on. It started in a stable because he decided to be so real that he would start life just like you and I. And he would live the life that you and I live. Faced every temptation that you and I have ever faced. And yet without sin. But at the end of that, he didn't stand up and say, hey man, I won. I got it. I'm cool. Everybody's failed. I'm the only guy who passed. He says this. I do this for you. This great joy is to be for you. Wow. Not only that, though, this great joy will be for your family. I want you want your family to experience this. And not only that, but I want this to be for your neighbor. I want this to be for all people, for everyone. Because look at Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 7. He says, Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be held on to, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. He came to identify with us. He came to give his life for us. And it started in a stable. That's what we come here this morning to celebrate, that he came to be among us. It may be 2,000 years later, but it's still just as real. Because after this happened, he lived his life, he ministered, he showed everything that was supposed to be right. And then he went to a cross to die for you and for me. And then after that, 3 days later, he rose from the dead. Days later, weeks later, he arose, he ascended into heaven, and he said he's coming back. Next time he comes back, we are not going to miss it. It's going to be obvious to the entire world. It's going to be an incredible thing. But between now and then, we wait so that we can tell every person about what is given for them. That this great joy can be theirs because it's based in God's grace. And it came for them. And so this morning we're going to begin to wrap this up, but we're going to sing the traditional song, Silent Night. And we're really glad to sing it. And hopefully you got a candle. And if you didn't, share with the person next to you their candle. We're going to sing Silent Night. But here's the deal. We sing it because of his redeeming grace. And so, as we begin to sing it, we're going to kind of light candles and we'll let you guys kind of spread it. We're not going to do it in an organized fashion. We're going to let you do it because that's kind of the way it goes, right? The way the world's going to be reached isn't in some sort of step-by-step way. It's going to be by people doing it. And as we sing this song, the traditional thing is, I kind of grew up in a church once in a while. We went on Christmas and Easter, and usually Christmas was so crowded we stood in line and then said, wow, this is crazy, let's go home. And so we didn't go that often. But when we did go, there was kind of an orchestrated up and down thing. I don't know if you did that in a church. And it just drove me nutty. I was like, what in the world is this all about? So here's the deal. We're not going to orchestrate this. But I would like to suggest to you that in your own heart, if you say, his grace is sufficient. His love is what gives me joy. If somewhere in you, you say, I want to raise it high. I want to tell him I love him. I want to tell him I'm grateful that he came. I'm grateful he came as a baby. I'm grateful he gave himself on a cross. I'm grateful that he's coming back. And I want to raise it high. Now, after we sing Silent Night, we're going to sing another song called He Reigns. And I want you can keep this going, okay? And you can raise it then. You can raise this as to whatever. And maybe you're not that candle-raising kind, you know? It's hard for you to get your arms up above your waist, you know? And I kind of grew up that way, you know? To raise my arms, my hands, and praise, it's kind of awkward for me, you know? But who cares about the person next to you? But you think, I want to raise it high. I want to raise his grace so high that it changes life. And I want to honor him for what he's doing. I want to love him. I want to give my life to him. Maybe this morning, you have never given your life to Christ. And you're at that dead-end road. Maybe you're at a place where there's darkness and cold. And that's exactly what the light of Christ came into, was the darkness and the cold of life. That's why he came, to deal with where we all live sometimes, right? And the difficulties of all that we go through.